Just one series left to go, and then the Disco Dan era officially starts in Seattle. Plus, what are some of the wildest trade rumors surrounding the Seattle Kraken? That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey to the hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet over at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Hey everyone, Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken. If we're meeting for the first time, I've been your host here since the beginning. Also a contributor over at CBS Sports for their hockey vertical, as well as, of course, women's basketball. And today we're going to talk about the majority of today's episode is going to be talking about two future Kraken people. Oh, we've got balloons. That's kind of cool. Two future Kraken people. I don't know what these new activations are. Anyway, we've got some news on Shane Wright, but also the Firebirds, because they have punched their ticket to the Calder Cup Final for the second consecutive season. That means we are only one series away from Disco Dan Bilesma taking over the reins at the Seattle NHL club. But before we get into that, what are we going to see from the front office as we march ever closer, not just to the draft, but also to the trade deadline? And we talked about Shane Wright rumors last episode. And this one, I gotta say, it might take the cake regarding rumors when it comes to Shane Wright. But first, let's talk about a perhaps new member of the Seattle Kraken, at least trade rumor wise, and has ties actually to our general manager, Ron Francis. And that is that Marty Necas, who is currently with the Carolina Hurricanes. Allegedly, there are conversations with 5 teams, Seattle being one of them, where Marty is in the mix. This is coming from NHL Network David Pagnotta. There are teams that have him on their radar, on their target list. Seattle's on there, Nashville, Montreal, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Calgary Flames as well. There's a number of teams that are going to Eric Tulsky and the staff in Carolina and to call and see if they can pry him out of Carolina. So who is Marty Necas? He was selected 12th overall in the 2017 draft by, again, Ronnie Francis when he was with the Hurricanes. He has 362 career games, 97 goals, 146 assists, and a plus 20 goal differential. Now, his best numbers as of late were in the 2022-23 season, 71 points, the split there, 28 goals, 43 assists in all 82 games. He had a career best 1824 average time on ice. Now, this past season dipped a little. He only played 73 games, 53 points, still had 20 plus goals, and 29 assists. So, dipping under that 70 points there. He had 71 the season prior to. Now, I found this interesting. The folks over at NHL Network saying if you already have a team that has some physical players or good size, a guy like Marty Necas comes in there and gives you a skill element. Now, here's the thing. I wouldn't say the Seattle Kraken have physical players. I think we have not the best size, if we're being honest. So if Marty Necas is to complement physical, then as the roster is constructed right now, I'm not sure that he's a good fit. That was just from this comment. That being said, we know that offense is a huge thing that needs to get remedied in the off season, which we, the Seattle Kraken, are squarely in the off season. So, does this mean if Necas is a target, does that mean that the Seattle Kraken are also looking at some more physical players? It could be interesting. But one way they could get some value to get some physical veteran players, I think you do still need some veteran presence on this team, but of a little bit higher of a caliber than we have right now. Apparently, there are also trade rumors regarding the Seattle Kraken and Montreal. And of all people that I saw this trade rumor about, it's about Shane Wright. Could Shane Wright possibly end up with Montreal? I think it goes without saying. I know some of you did comment on YouTube, which I appreciate, but we don't want to get rid of Shane Wright. I said it on the last episode with Disco Dan coming, and we'll talk about that in the next segment, with Dan Bilesma very close to wrapping up what hopefully will be another wildly successful Firebirds season. He said he had some unfinished business. Again, we'll talk about that soon. You're going to have Dan Bilesma as the head coach in Seattle. We know Seattle wants to shake things up. I guess the question becomes, is Shane Wright still the right guy, no pun intended, for the Seattle Kraken? Do you give him a year under Dan Bilesma and see what he can do? But is it top 6 or bust for Shane Wright? Is there space for him somewhere else? Is he an upgrade from somebody else? And I think those are questions that the Seattle Kraken are still trying to figure out. I think we're going to have another very telling training camp, although they're so short. But I think it's going to be another telling training camp. And I mean, again, I don't think we're looking to move Shane Wright. What makes sense to even get back from Montreal? The report that I saw said a first-round pick and maybe some blue line prospects. And we'll talk about our draft, our paper draft. We have that coming up. I think the graphic should be out this week. And then over on Locked On NHL prospects, I guess we'll be graded on our pick. I got a really bad grade last year. I'm not even mad at it. So I'm curious to see if I did a little better this year. But spoiler alert, I did pick a defender, a blue liner. I do think we need some blue liners in our prospect pool. I'm okay with that. And we need some right now. Again, it goes back to what Sam Holloway, part of the ownership group, said. There are things that we want to do in the future, but there are also things that we can and arguably need to do now. And I do think defense is one of them. I get it. Advanced analytics, yada, yada, yada. I feel like I've made my case, but for those, again, who maybe are listening for the first time, not one of our everydayers or OGers yet, my take on some of what we see regarding the defensive acumen of the Seattle Kraken is that defensive, especially, the advanced analytics that we have are really looking at what's possible, right? They are projections more than hard numbers. They go off of formulas and, based on what has happened, but they're not fail proof. And the Seattle Kraken do have some holes defensively. So anyway, I don't think you give up Shane Wright for just prospects. A first round pick plus prospects, maybe. Montreal has pick number 5 and 26 in the first round in 2024. They also have 2 first round picks in 25. You could flip some of those picks, get somebody else who's already established in the league. Do I like it for Shane Wright? I think it's a little early. That being said, you don't want to miss the market if this is a team, even under Dan Bilesma in their first year, or in his first year, excuse me, that can't get it done. And I think it seems a little bit too early, but not by a lot. And Shane Wright, we're not getting to see right now in the AHL playoffs due to injury. So it's just an interesting time to see so many trade rumors regarding Shane Wright. I mean, we had it last year. We talked about it last offseason as well. But it's just hard to gauge if it's a good deal one way or the other, because at least right now, in the short-term memory, we're not getting to see Shane Wright. But coming up next, we're going to talk about Shane Wright's team right now, and that's the Coachella Valley Firebirds, of course, led by our new head coach of the Seattle Kraken, Dan Bilesma. They are headed once again to the Calder Cup Final. We'll talk about that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. All right, I mentioned it at the top of the show. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now, you got to know that summertime means baseball, NHL playoffs or finals, Stanley Cup final happening, NBA finals happening right now, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park in MLB. I also want to point out some WNBA odds. The future betting as far as championships, Seattle Storm have the 5th best odds to win a championship at plus 1,800. Ooh, got a little spicy between Nneka Ogwumike, good to see her back on the court, and Napheesa Collier, who could be maybe silently an under the radar MVP pick once again for those Minnesota Lynx. But remember that FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So head over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And you also know that Locked On Sports today is where you need to go if you want free 24/7 streaming programmed for you, a sports fan, every day to bring you the biggest stories from our Locked On experts. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, and it's streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team every single day. Let's get into these Firebirds. I know we were going for the sweep. Again, those silver spoon comments creating a little bit of a tussle on social media, but this was also a pretty physical series with the Admirals, who we did take down in game 5, 5-1. Now, this is after a little bit of a butt whooping, in fairness. Let's just talk about that. Or actually, let's not talk about it. Who cares about that? Happened the other day. We overcame it. John Hayden, you know that name, Kraken fans, got the hat trick in the 5-1 win. Drieger once again, great in net, bounce back. Speaking of bounces, just some weird bounces, especially early on in game 4, the one that Milwaukee took. But Drieger looking good again. And if you are new to the channel, go check out the episode where we talked about what is the future of Chris Drieger. Is he going to be the one that got away? Because he's crushing it in the AHL. He was with the AHL team, the Firebirds, last year because he was on a rehab stint, but did not make the squad coming out of training camp in the fall. So what is the future for Drieger? I will say he's handled everything as a pro and now has the Coachella Valley Firebirds in position to win. They took down, or I should say they took the Western Conference title. And, they have, just like we see in other leagues, particularly the NHL, when you win the Western Conference, you win a trophy. Last year, captains didn't touch the trophy. They lost in game 7. This year, in the final, I should say. This year, the captains, although very gently, did touch the trophy. Actually, the amazing Haley Moore, assistant commissioner over at the AHL, was once again on the ice. For those who don't know, she has a history not only as a women's hockey player herself, but as a founding member, a founding general manager in the National Women's Hockey League that then became the PHF, that is now defunct and was apparently acquired by the PWHL. But anyway, there's a lot of juicy PWHL news. I'll be on Locked On NHL on Friday to talk about that. But anyway, I digress. Not a great game, 7-2 loss right before clinching, but it's clinching that matters. And the Firebirds were able to do that. This was a kind of wild game when it came to penalty minutes. 15 minutes served overall, 5 chances at the apple for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, as in on the power play. They were 50% on the penalty kill, just the 1 power play for Milwaukee. 2 out of 5 for the Kraken, the Kraken affiliate, the Firebirds, when it came to the power play. Hayden had a goal at even strength, a power play goal, and also a shorthanded goal. Oh my gosh, the breakaway on the shorty was chef's kiss, beautiful. John Hayden just really having a great performance, got the goals 5, 6, and 7 in these playoffs. I really like the pass, though, on the second goal from Hayden, from Devon Shore, just really locked in. Devon Shore would get a goal himself, assisted by Cameron Hughes and Cale Fleury. That was also a power play goal. So things seem to be clicking for the Firebirds. At times, they lost their discipline last season. And as I spoke with Jason J.D. Hernandez, who's your PA voice of the Firebirds at Acrisure Arena, he's also the host of Locked On Anaheim Ducks. We talked about that. And again, how Drieger seems to be a good, calming veteran presence that also is crushing it in net for the Firebirds. So one last time for Disco Dan and potentially some of these players on the roster, if they can find their way on the Seattle Kraken roster. But, Dan has told us that this is unfinished business. And so the Firebirds are in position to do exactly what they wanted to do this season. We talked about it early on. It was a tough start, a stumble out of the gate for this Firebird squad, but Disco Dan and his coaching staff, they seem to have this team peaking at the right time, and you absolutely love to see it. So the series, in the East between Cleveland and Hershey still going on. Right now, Cleveland, they were able to get the last 2 wins. They won Thursday 3-2 over Hershey and 5-1 on Saturday over Hershey. And so, things tightening up there. If you remember, of course, we met the Hershey Bears in the final last year, but the series right now is tied. And we'll see who comes out the victor in that series. Hershey took game 1. That they had the first 2 games go into overtime. Hershey took both of those overtime games. They seem to be pretty good at overtime. They also took game 3 and game 4 and 5, as I mentioned, Cleveland took. Excuse me, I said the series is tied, but we've got 5 games. Game 6 is tonight, June 10th, 7 p.m. I believe that's Central. So it's going to be good. We have at least one more game before the Firebirds know their opponent. And when that is the case, of course, we will chime back in when it comes to the Coachella Valley Firebirds. Coming up next, we had our ECHL team also in the finals. And unfortunately, that run has come to a close. We'll talk about that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Unfortunately, the Kelly Cup finals are over. And once again, the Florida Everblades are your champion. Not only are they the champion for 2024, they're fourth overall in franchise history, their third consecutive, and the third year that they beat the regular season champion to take home the final trophy. I mean, when you play like that, what can you say? But it's not without a fight from our guys. And, Kansas City, things were a little bit shaky at times. We talked about that on the program. It's been great to chat with Tad O'Had, who's the general manager and head coach of your very own Kansas City Mavericks, our ECHL affiliate. But ultimately, they fell to Florida. The shots on goal in this game, let's see. It was 39 shots to 32 shots in favor of Florida. But Kansas City outshooting Florida in both the first and second frame. But the third, yikes, outshot 18-3. Outshot 3-1 also in overtime. But how did it happen? Of course, it's Cotton with his 9th overall in the playoffs, gets things started late in the first period. In the second, Florida gets started first, Carpenter with his 12th, and then Andreev, who assisted Cotton in the first goal of the game, gets his 6th goal of the playoffs. We've had Max Andreev on the program before, you might remember. Another goal for the Mavericks in Walker, a power play goal, but then they get bit with a shorthanded goal, 8:55 mark in the third period. Florida would then go, that would be the first of 3 unanswered goals, including overtime. So Kansas City got off to a good start. They leveled things out again in the second, but it was that third period gave Florida all the momentum, and they took it to overtime. Jack LaFontaine did get the start here, 35 saves, 39 shots faced. Johnson for Florida, 29 saves on 32 shots. The power play, 1 of 4, so 25% for Kansas City. The PK was 100%. 0 of 2 for Florida on the power play. But ultimately, we talked about it. It just seemed like Kansas City was kind of playing with fire. A lot of the series, the Toledo series in particular, this Florida series, they were getting outshot. And some of those hope plays that we sometimes hear from Tad O'Had seem to be the downfall of this Kansas City team. But you know what? It's their best finish in program history. They had a solid regular season. And hey, let's see how things play out for the Firebirds, because maybe it'll be history repeating, just in a different league when it comes to Kansas City next year. But a lot of good pieces. Tad has been wonderful to chat with. And I of course wanted Kansas City to win it all, but there are lessons also in losing, in falling short of your expectations, perhaps at times, including that maybe you didn't even fall short of your own expectations. You just ran into someone who was better prepared, harder working. It happens. It happens in life, and it certainly happens in sports. But stick taps to Kansas City, stick taps to, of course, Tad, but also the players and the staff that have helped us cover the ECHL team a little bit more consistently here at Locked On Kraken. But let me know, what did you like the ECHL coverage? Are you enjoying hearing from Tad? I can tell you right off the hop, I love speaking to Tad. But we are trying to change some things up here for Locked On Kraken. Obviously, the Seattle Kraken not in the Stanley Cup Finals right now, so that's changed our approach a little bit. But I think there should be space and time to hear from our pipeline, because as we hear from Tad every time we have him on the program through audio clips, he believes this is the strongest connection from ECHL, AHL to NHL in his career. And that is saying something. And I'm hoping that instead of trickling down, what we'll see is that things will trickle up, because we had our ECHL team in the finals. We have our AHL team going to the finals for the second consecutive season. So now we need to get that consistency up with the National Hockey League. But as we mentioned, this is the last ride for Disco Dan in the AHL, at least for a time, because he's got his head coaching job with the Seattle Kraken waiting for him. So let's see who they get. Another game tonight. You can watch that on AHL TV. Will it be Hershey? Will it be Cleveland? Either way, I'm pretty sure the Firebirds are going to be ready. And we will be ready too here on Locked On Kraken. So I'll close out the show as I always do. Be kind to yourselves. Be kind to one another. Hold fast. Stay true. Let's go Kraken. Get fired up. And you know what, Mavs? We're proud of you. And for everyone listening and watching on YouTube, hey, YouTubers, thank you so much for the engagement in the comments. Thanks so much for listening in, and I will catch you on the next episode. Hey, peace out, everybody. Enjoy your day.